Emily Carter did not plan to follow her husband that night, but the thought grew quietly in her mind as the clock moved past 10, and the house stayed silent. Rain tapped against the windows of their suburban home in New Jersey, the kind of steady rain that made everything feel heavier. Daniel had called earlier, saying work had run late again, his voice smooth but distant, and Emily noticed how quickly he ended the call. She stood in the living room, lights off, holding her phone, replaying small moments from the past few months that no longer made sense, the way Daniel started dressing sharper for no clear reason, the way he smiled at messages he never explained, the way he avoided her eyes during dinner. Their marriage had not been perfect, but it had been honest, or at least she believed it was. Emily was a practical woman in her early 40s, a marketing consultant who trusted facts more than feelings, yet lately her chest felt tight for reasons she could not explain. Love, she realized, was changing shape, slipping through cracks she had ignored. She remembered the early years with Daniel, long talks, shared dreams, the comfort of knowing someone chose you every day, and the contrast made the present silence louder. She tried to calm herself, telling her mind she was tired, overthinking, but her heart refused to settle. Without fully deciding, she picked up her coat, slipped on her shoes, and walked out into the rain, locking the door behind her as if that simple action crossed a line she could not uncross. The street smelled wet and cold, and when she saw Daniel's blue sedan pass at the corner, her breath caught. Acting on instinct, she raised her hand and flagged down a taxi just as it approached. The driver slowed, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a steady presence, and when Emily climbed into the back seat, her hands shook slightly. "Where to?" he asked, his voice calm, almost grounding. Emily hesitated, watching Daniel's car ahead, her pulse loud in her ears, then said, "Please follow that blue car." The driver glanced at her in the mirror, not curious, not judgmental, just attentive, and nodded. "All right," he said simply, introducing himself as Noah. As the taxi moved through familiar streets that suddenly felt strange, Emily's thoughts raced. She wondered what she was hoping to find, proof or peace, and feared she would get neither. She told herself she could still turn back, still choose not to know, but every turn the blue car took pulled her further forward. The rain blurred the lights, and memories came fast, holidays spent laughing, quiet mornings with coffee, promises made without thinking they could ever break. She realized how lonely she had felt even while married, how often she had blamed herself for the growing distance, thinking she had not tried hard enough. The taxi slowed when Daniel's car turned into a side street near a small cafe that Emily barely noticed before. Her heart pounded as she leaned forward, eyes fixed on the windshield. Noah drove carefully, giving space, saying nothing. The silence between them felt safe, as if he understood this moment mattered. When the blue sedan parked, Emily's breath caught, her mind screaming for time to stop. She wasn't ready, yet she was. The taxi rolled to a stop across the street, rain still falling, the cafe lights glowing warmly in contrast to the cold realization settling inside her. Emily knew, before she saw anything else, that her life was already changing, and this quiet decision to follow her husband was only the beginning. Emily's stomach twisted as she watched Daniel step out of the blue sedan and meet a woman under the small cafe's awning, their laughter soft and familiar, the kind of easy closeness that made her chest ache. She gripped the edge of the taxi seat, knuckles white, her eyes following every gesture, every smile that belonged to someone else now. The cafe's warm lights made the scene look peaceful, almost beautiful, and that made the pain sharper, more vivid. Noah, noticing her trembling hands in the rearview mirror, didn't speak judgment, he simply waited, giving her the space to process the shock in her own time. Emily's mind raced with questions she wasn't ready to voice. How long had this been happening? How could she have missed it? Was this the reason for the quiet distance she had felt for months? She had imagined confrontations, imagined catching him in moments of guilt, imagined yelling, crying, begging, and yet seeing it unfold silently, casually, made her feel helpless in a way she hadn't anticipated. Tears started to blur her vision, and she swallowed hard, wishing she could disappear, wishing she could rewind years, but the reality was cruelly present. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a hollow sense of betrayal, yet no words came. She simply sat frozen, letting the rain on the taxi window mirror the tears streaming silently down her face. Noah reached over, gently turning the meter off without a word, his gesture small, but comforting, a reminder that someone nearby understood her need for dignity and calm even in chaos. Emily, still silent, began telling him fragments of her life, how long she had trusted Daniel, the growing unease she had brushed aside, the lonely nights filled with questions without answers, and the slow erosion of her faith in her marriage. Noah listened without interruption, his presence steady, his eyes reflecting understanding, not pity, and for the first time that night, Emily felt the tiniest flicker of relief. It wasn't the relief of finding solace in betrayal's clarity, but relief that someone could witness her pain without exploiting it, without demanding immediate action, just being present. She realized how starved she had been for that. Someone who didn't force her to react. Someone who let her absorb the truth at her own pace. Minutes stretched, rain fell harder, and the world outside blurred into streaks of gold and gray. But inside the taxi, a strange calm settled around Emily, a pause from the storm inside her heart. Noah handed her a small card before she stepped out, his voice soft, almost hesitant, "If you ever need a ride, or someone to talk to." The simplicity of it struck her. There was no expectation, no judgment, just a lifeline extended in the middle of her emotional chaos. Emily gripped the card tightly in her hand, realizing she didn't know why it mattered so much, only that it did. As she walked away, the cafe lights fading behind her, she felt a mix of devastation and the faintest glimmer of hope, the kind that whispers there might still be kindness, connection, or even love waiting somewhere beyond the pain. The city felt different now, more unforgiving, yet somehow full of possibility, and Emily understood that this night, driven by instinct and heartbreak, would mark the beginning of a journey she hadn't expected, a journey that would test her heart, her strength, and ultimately, her capacity to love again. After the painful revelation at the cafe, Emily knew things could never return to how they were with Daniel, no matter how many apologies he offered or promises he made. She moved into a small apartment across town, a modest space filled with sunlight and quiet, a stark contrast to the tension and secrets that had suffocated her at home. At first, every day felt heavy, each morning a reminder of the betrayal she had witnessed, the love she thought was unshakable now fractured. She buried herself in work, organizing marketing campaigns, answering emails, and filling her calendar with tasks that demanded attention, but never healed the ache in her chest. Nights were the hardest. They were long and empty, echoing with the memory of Daniel's laughter with someone else, the warmth she once trusted now a ghostly ache. And yet, in this space of solitude, her thoughts often returned to Noah, the taxi driver who had listened without judgment, who had silently offered comfort when she felt most exposed. She didn't know why she was drawn to him, only that the memory of his calm presence brought a strange sense of safety she hadn't realized she had been craving. Weeks passed, and Emily began to call the number on the card he had given her that stormy night, initially for rides home from late nights at the office, but gradually their conversations stretched longer, moving beyond logistics to stories, laughter, childhood memories, and hopes for the future. Noah never rushed her, never pressed, never blurred boundaries. He simply existed as a gentle presence, a reminder that some people could be anchors in the storm without trying to control it. As their conversations grew, Emily found herself sharing pieces of her life she had kept locked away, moments of joy, moments of fear, and for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of lightness, a sense of being truly seen. Yet, even as this new connection blossomed quietly, the past wasn't finished with her. One evening, as Emily prepared dinner, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Daniel, holding flowers, eyes filled with regret. "I made a mistake," he said simply. I want to try again. Please don't throw us away. Emily froze, her heart caught between the comfort of what she knew and the possibility of something she had not yet dared to imagine. She invited him in, and they sat at her small kitchen table, coffee cooling between them, as he spoke of therapy, of changed priorities, of love that had been foolishly taken for granted. Every word was familiar yet foreign, a bittersweet echo of a life she had once lived. She listened politely, her mind racing with memories and what ifs, but her heart felt quiet, unresponsive. The truth was slowly settling in. Daniel's remorse could not undo the cracks, the quiet betrayals, the loneliness that had hollowed her out. That night, as she called Noah for a ride after their meeting, she realized that her life had shifted in subtle, irrevocable ways. Noah's car arrived, warm and familiar in the night, and Emily stepped in, exhausted but curious. As they drove in silence for a few blocks, Emily's mind replayed Daniel's words, the comfort she once sought, and the calm presence of Noah, who had never tried to fix her, but had simply accompanied her while she found herself again. She understood that love could take many forms, and sometimes, the most meaningful connection wasn't the one that demanded everything, but the one that gave her space to breathe, to heal and to grow. The city lights passed in streaks of yellow and red, and Emily felt a quiet determination stirring inside her. This wasn't about choosing between Daniel and Noah yet, it was about choosing herself, her peace, her clarity, and her capacity to embrace life without fear. The slow realization dawned that she didn't need someone to fill the emptiness created by betrayal. She needed someone who could walk beside her as she reclaimed her life, someone like Noah, whose presence was gentle, steady, and unassuming yet profoundly comforting. And as the taxi moved through the familiar streets that once felt heavy with sorrow, Emily felt a tentative hope, the kind that whispers of new beginnings, of trust slowly rebuilt, and of the quiet possibility of love that doesn't demand, but simply exists, ready to grow at its own pace. Emily felt a strange mix of nervousness and relief as she agreed to meet Daniel for coffee, sitting across from him in the small, sunlit cafe that felt both familiar and foreign. He spoke earnestly, recounting memories of their early years together, apologizing for the distance that had grown between them, and explaining the steps he had taken to repair himself, from therapy sessions to self-reflection, promising that he wanted to rebuild what had been broken. Emily listened, nodding at times, her hands wrapped around the warm cup, but her heart remained quiet, guarded and observant, realizing that words alone could not erase months of hidden truths. The conversation stirred a wave of emotions, nostalgia, sadness, a pang of what might have been, but deep down, she understood that the life she had once known with Daniel could not simply be restored. Trust, once fractured, required time, proof, and unwavering consistency. As she stepped out of the cafe, the crisp air hitting her face, Emily felt a weight lifted, yet uncertainty lingered. She was caught between the past she had lived and the future she could choose. Calling Noah for a ride, she realized that the taxi she had come to rely on symbolized more than just transportation. It represented stability, understanding, and a presence that did not demand, judge, or complicate her fragile emotions. As Noah drove, city lights reflecting off the wet streets, Emily allowed herself to voice the uncertainty she felt. I don't know what I'm supposed to choose, she admitted softly. Noah, with his usual calm, pulled over near the riverbank, letting the water's gentle ripples mirror the quiet turbulence in her chest, and said, sometimes choosing isn't about who you love more. It's about who helps you become yourself again. Those words resonated deeply, and Emily felt clarity beginning to bloom. Noah had never tried to save her from pain, he had simply walked beside her, offering comfort without expectation. She realized that this presence, steady and kind, had allowed her to rebuild her own strength, to feel safe in her own heart again. Months passed, and Emily prepared for a new chapter, securing a job in another city, and packing her life into a suitcase, with determination and hope. Standing at the bus stop, anticipation and anxiety mingling, she spotted a familiar yellow taxi approaching, and Noah stepped out with his gentle smile. "Need a ride?" he asked, as if nothing had changed, though everything had. Laughing through the mix of tears and relief, Emily felt the weight of the past lighten, understanding that her life had twisted in unexpected ways, not because of betrayal alone, but because of her own courage, resilience, and the quiet support of someone who had never forced her to rush healing. She stepped into the taxi, feeling a renewed sense of freedom, a readiness to embrace the future on her own terms, yet open to the possibility of love that was patient, honest, and kind. As they drove away, city streets stretching ahead like lines on a blank page, Emily's heart felt full in a way it hadn't for months, carrying both the lessons of pain and the gentle promise of new beginnings. She realized that the twists and turns of life, though painful, had led her to a place of self-discovery, emotional clarity, and unexpected connection, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the exhilarating, liberating truth that she was finally free to choose the life and love she deserved, not out of need, but out of hope and self-respect.